Welcome to Processing Purpose, a business and lifestyle podcast committed to having honest conversations about the stuff in our lives that is often suppressed, ignored, or overlooked. We are two brothers from very different backgrounds, but with one common goal. From entrepreneurship to relationships, from hobbies to house projects, nothing is off limits as we process becoming the best version of ourselves in business and life.
Feels good to be back.
We're
Back. I'm stoked to be here, and I'm glad.
always.
We got a little chance to catch up beforehand. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's like we get here, set up, and go, and it's just nice to touch base with you and see how things are going. And
Yeah.
life is life, full of it.
You know, it's interesting. Even as I try and be more authentic and try and be more true when people ask questions like, hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
Like, it's difficult because you want to be genuine, but you don't want to be a victim. And sometimes you're on like this role of like, man, things just don't feel like they're going my way.
Yeah.
And it's hard to be authentic to that. So,
And truthfully, our entire childhood, I'd say up to the last handful of years, the norm was, hey, how you doing? Good. Like that was the automatic response, and everyone was okay with that. I think there's just new normals happening. I think, like we've talked about, people are really deciding what they're saying yes to nowadays. And I think in some ways people are kind of choosing how they're going to express themselves now these days. And that question is no longer an automatic response. When someone asks you that, it actually makes you become introspective and go, how am I doing actually?
but only if you allow it to.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And it part of that, and we've talked about this before, part of that is who's asking.
Yes.
And what that moment is, right? If it's church and you're in the lobby and they're like, how you doing? It's like, good, man. I'm great. How are you? How's the kids? You know,
Yeah, totally.
But if you're sitting down over a beer or coffee and they're like, hey, how you doing?
Yeah,
You know, it's a different moment,
totally.
right? So you got to be aware of that. One of the things that ties in with that and what we had talked about talking about today, that I appreciate whenever we have a conversation that's in a moment that it makes sense to. And I say something that could be a story, could be an excuse. You always push back just a touch and go, oh, really? Tell me about that.
Yeah.
And force me to go, and that's what happened today.
Yeah.
Right? I was saying something and you just postured a little bit, and it just made me hesitate. And so we dove a little bit deeper. And really that's where the topic of today came out of. And that is the stories that we tell ourselves, right? The things that we convince ourselves are true about our life, this life, our experience, the way we interact with the world.
Totally.
That may not be true.
Yeah.
And often, maybe universally, but often for sure, we don't see it. It's a blind spot.
Well, honesty and truth are not always synonymous, and I think a lot of people get lost in that, meaning just because you believe something to be true means you're being honest about it, but doesn't necessarily mean that thing is actually true, right? So you're projecting in a way that's not inauthentic, right? You're presenting in a way that's like, this is what I truly believe, but it's just not reality. And so that's cognitive dissonance, right? We've talked about that. That's a term, but that's true, right? We convince ourselves of things that may or may not actually be true, really for the sake of probably your own mental health or emotional health, trying to protect yourself, creating walls and barriers around things. So that
it's
you don't,
a safety net probably on some level.
Yeah, on some level maybe. Or, just a classic mask, right? That we want to create this persona. We see it all over social media. Right. In fact, I saw a guy put up a post that said literally everyone on Facebook, and it was Stuart, remember from Mad TV. Look what I can do.
Sure.
And it's kind of that way. Right. And so, but back to not just cognitive dissonance in a light of like, just pursuing joyful things, but I mean the things that we convince ourselves that keep us in a rut, keep us in a space of bad behavior.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying from a malicious standpoint, but just laziness, slogginess, complacency, right? Those sorts of things. We kind of, you can't drive yourself to death, but we convince ourselves of a lot of things that we probably shouldn't.
So let's set this up then a little bit, because I feel like we could take a bit of an organized approach to this conversation and then see where it goes.
Yeah.
But there's a few lanes that we live in life. Okay, this could be our spiritual life, our family life, our health and fitness, our professional life, our recreation. Right? There's a few lanes that are common globally for us. We tell stories in all of them.
Right.
Give me an example of what we're talking about in a couple of those lanes that are common for people that we hear and go, is that really true?
Right.
Like, I know you believe that.
Right.
But is it the truth?
Right. And beliefs are the strongest thing in the world, right? So to try to change someone's beliefs about something is really difficult to do. But I'll give you a slight variation of it. This isn't maybe the best example, but I had the vision and still do really strongly feel that we should have a presence in the Cle Elum market, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's just
talked a lot about
45 minutes away from us. I've been talking about that maybe for 5 years. I mean, it's been going on and on and on. We've done some business out there. We've sold some homes, but we haven't really established ourselves out there as a brand. Not at all. I've recruited in about 6 agents from the Wenatchee market, which is the opposite direction. I am now in contract to open a second office in Wenatchee.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, thanks. I'm very excited. Should be open in October, November at the latest, which I'm really excited about.
Done.
Yeah, it's going to be a great spot. But the pursuit of that, which may still be advantageous and strategic business-wise, I've convinced myself that should be the next move, kind of because it's the easiest and most obvious move.
Yeah.
I still feel that strong pull over here, but why am I not moving toward it? You know what I mean? I've kind of convinced myself to just let that go for a moment and actually even expand elsewhere before I even go back. Again, that's a small variation. That's not a huge example, but I'm convincing myself that this is the route to go. But why is it so contrary to my original strong and still conviction of where we got to go as a business? So, anyway, small example, but
and I think that you could create those examples in any one lane. Like the obvious ones to me are, and we say the stories we tell ourselves. You could probably say that they're excuses. Right? On some level.
Way more excuses than reasons, for sure.
We might think they're true, and excuses, to some extent, we believe we know we're telling. So there might be some dissonance between those two examples. But, let's use, for example, like health and fitness. I don't have time to work out.
Everyone battles
story we
with
tell
that.
ourselves. I can't afford to eat healthy. Story we tell ourselves, right? The family life. Oh, that's just the way my kids are.
Or it's the way it's always going to be.
That's the way it's always going to be. This marriage isn't fixable.
All those. Yeah, so much.
Professional life. I can't quit my job. I'm stuck here. Right? I mean, you could go in every single category and come up with a cliche-ish story that's almost universal, that we hear constantly, that just isn't true.
And your energy follows your focus, So if you keep focusing on this marriage is not fixable, my kids are hard, that energy will follow that, and that's where your energy will land and will stay and will just suck. Interesting. I want to use another one too, because this one's very relevant to our relationship and what you've experienced. I've convinced myself that winging it is the way to go. And I still feel that way. And I shouldn't. You know what I mean? But I very much internally like, yeah, that's worked for me. Okay, up to this point, it has.
Yeah.
But going forward, will it continue?
Yeah.
That's a cognitive dissonance I've got to come to terms with. Right? And I'd say in some ways I'm probably maybe doing things maybe better than I actually think, because I'm hard on myself like anybody that wants to experience success is. You're hard on yourself. But maybe things are a little better than I think. But also, is that cognitive dissonance? Is that me convincing myself that I'm all right continuing doing these things that I know probably aren't best for myself and my growth and my progress in life, And so that's a very real one that you've experienced and gone, yeah, that is.
Well, I mean, the truth is, when it comes to growth, what brought us to this point won't take us to the next.
That's hard to come to terms with.
Right. And so, and I think that thread could be drawn professionally, relationally, raising kids, getting your health on track. Like, I think you could draw that line across the board, as we age, for example. And I'm, I turned 44 this year. And so I'm starting to notice I'm not recovering as fast as I used to. The work that I put in at the gym doesn't get the result that I used to. Like, there's just a chemical change that's taking place as you mature, right? The things that I used to do to get me to this point won't take me forward. Right. Same thing with the way we raise our kids, right? We both have still young kids, and we both have kids that are starting to teeter into adolescence as well. Mm-hmm. The way we raise them isn't going to work in their teenage years, right? What brought us to this point won't get us to the next point. And I think it's that pivot is certainly a part of this conversation as things change. You mentioned it this morning, like, everything around us is changing, and we forget to realize that we are also changing and need to change in all of this change, right? And
it's got chills when you said that. I'm not kidding. Like, that everyone needs to hear that and absorb what Luke just said.
Yeah, we must pivot and change the way we behave. We talk about pivot constantly.
Right.
And usually it's in terms of, this isn't working.
Yeah.
It's time to change. And we talk about it professionally and the things that we do to make money. But that might be a global truth on some level. Like, it's not working. Change, right? If you don't like the outcomes that you're getting, then you're going to have to change the inputs.
Need more grace around change. We do. Ourselves changing, other people changing, watching our spouses change, right? Allowing them to change, right? They're going through chemical changes also. They're getting older. Their hormones are changing, and some of it's surprising. And of course we revert back to like, well, I thought you were different, or, things used to be different, or you were this way, but that's not normal, right? That normal is change. Change is constantly happening. I'm really grateful. My brother, when I was like 13 or 14, I don't know where he heard this, but he said, there's two things in life you'll never control: death and change. The sooner you come to terms with that,
and taxes.
You can influence. I don't know. I was going to say you can influence
it, to be honest.
I know. I watched something recently that said, just don't be misled. You are a free range human in a tax farm. I was like, oh, sheesh.
Wow. All right. Back to your brother.
That's a whole nother.
That's a different podcast.
Series of videos that I don't even know if we're going to touch on. Anyway, but I do. I just think we need more grace. I think we need to be just kinder to ourselves, to individuals around us. I mean, sure, like, set standards and expectations for yourself and everybody else around you too, but it's just part of life. We can't fight it. The more we fight it, the more stressful it gets.
There's two sides of this, right? So you referenced provide grace with change. We are quick, and it's often easier to look at somebody else and be like, well, if you just did this and this and this different, it would be different, right?
Thinking is hard. That's why most people judge, right?
That's the easy part. Yeah. Why do we have a hard time turning that lens on us? And I don't even mean, sometimes we do it intentionally, but sometimes it's just out of ignorance. Like, this is the story I heard my dad tell.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So therefore it must be true.
Right.
What is that? Why can we see in others what we can't see in ourselves?
We call them blind spots, and we also know that there's a parable written about it too, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's gone so far as to religious text having examples of helping us realize our flaws, right? Like, in other words, Jesus talks about take the the plank out of your own eye before you call out the speck in somebody else's, you know? And that's like the moment you read that or hear that statement, you think, wow, I need to humble myself right away.
Yeah.
Because but they are blind spots. And I think that's where we go back to coaching, right? Coaching, having a mentor, having some individual in your life that can look at you in a non-judgmental way. That's the most important piece, a safe, non-judgmental space for you to be yourself, but then to be vulnerable, and then allow someone to look at you and go, hey, I'm seeing this. These are probably the steps you need to take if you want to make that positive change in your life. Hard to hear, not easy, so freaking important.
Yeah, mental health it's becoming more of a thing. Mm-hmm. But our generation, meaning, for those of us in our 40s, we're Gen Xers, right on the edge, right? Yep. Mental health wasn't a thing.
And it wasn't ostracized. It just wasn't a thing. It wasn't a big topic. Yeah.
It wasn't a thing. And so it still has a bit of stigma because for our parents, it was ostracized.
It was.
Right?
Yep. You're weak.
For us, that's right. Yeah. And then for us, wasn't necessarily like you were judged by it, but it wasn't sought.
Yeah.
And hearing you say that with coaching, and I hope people can see the connection there, that even when they think they're in health, nothing's going wrong.
Right.
Like I don't need a therapist. I don't need a coach. I don't need a counselor. I don't need whatever label you want to put on them.
Yeah.
There are things in our life we are not capable of seeing on our own.
Not possible. You're not a superhero, and you can't. Yeah, and that's more in the lens of perfection. You are not that. You need somebody who's maybe had a little bit more life experience than you. That's going to tell you whatever you're freaking out about right now, there's resolution to. There's so much strength in that. There's so much strength in bouncing your feelings off someone versus your thoughts and ideas off someone. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I have ideas. I have a ton of ideas. Most of them are terrible, but I actually appreciate when someone tells me that's a terrible idea. You know what I mean? Like, it helps me understand. Don't waste your time on this, man. Like, I get why you got excited about that.
Yeah.
Stop. Go do something else. That is helpful for me, to hear that kind of feedback. So, yeah, the stories you tell yourself are often not necessarily dishonest or untruthful, but they might be incomplete. And you might need somebody to fill those gaps for you.
Is it because we know the alternative is going to be difficult? Do you think that's why we lie to ourselves?
Maybe. And it's weird that we avoid difficult things because the truth is, when we overcome something difficult, that is our most empowered state. So why we avoid empowerment is really interesting, because that's in and of itself what's happening. If you pursue the problem, it turns into a big headache if you don't pursue the problem, or at least trying to solve it. But yeah, like seek out empowerment. The only way you're empowered is solving problems.
Is it just on some level then it's the challenges I know versus the challenges I don't know?
Just uncertainty in general.
Yeah, it's I might be uncomfortable. This might not be working. I might be miserable, but at least I know what to expect.
I couldn't agree more. I think absolutely. Yes, of course.
If I make this change, that's scary.
Right.
It could go totally wrong.
Right.
It could go totally right, but it could go totally wrong.
Right.
And I don't think we give ourselves an opportunity to think about how it could go totally right.
And what's ironic is when
we focus on the negative.
Oh yeah, and when we buy a lottery ticket, even though you try not to, if you've ever bought one, I buy one like once every 6 months just for fun. And even though
I don't think I've ever bought one,
start to think like,
well, what if?
What if I'm the one that just gets to check out and just, and I think that's totally normal. I think to allow our brains to go there and dream a little bit. But I think it's also just as important for somebody to be around you that can speak to, some of the negatives that come along in our lives too, that hold us back, more than anything.
Here's a good exercise that I got exposed to. So the Masters was last weekend, 2 weekends ago?
And Scheffler's, man, he just proves himself to be A great guy.
Mm-hmm.
Just the responses he has. Didn't he say golf is like number 5 in his life now or something like that?
Something like that.
Awesome response.
Well, and I mean, he even said that weekend, he's like, look, if my wife goes into labor, I don't care where I'm at in this tournament, I'm leaving. That was the expectation he put out there, and his wife didn't go into labor, or she didn't tell him. I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
you know, he obviously went on to win it. But my point for bringing up the Masters was Max Homa.
Okay.
Was one of the final day contenders. Had put on 3 great rounds, and one of the things that he said is, my hack for controlling the emotion of a bad shot is when all of a sudden I find myself visualizing something that could go very wrong. He goes, I stop and I take an equal amount of time to visualize what happens if it goes right. And he offsets that the devil on your shoulder that's going, whoa, wait, this could be a train wreck in this way, and we spiral down this, well, then I'm not going to do it. But it could also go this way, and he spends time it's kind of a weird word, but marinating in the positive of that action potentially as well. And I was like, that is good advice, because the negative, I don't know about for you, but for me, the negative is easier to visualize. I don't want to say necessarily it's a default, but I think it somehow comes a little bit more naturally. Maybe that's just me, but to think about how it could go wrong, and it creates hesitation, and it takes effort to think about how it could go right.
We always talk about our values being this and that, but really at the end of the day, internally, deep down inside, safety and security are our number one value.
Yeah.
So everything we do is going to lean toward that.
Well,
right?
Maslow's hierarchy, right?
Yeah, exactly. I actually wrote that down. Self-actualization is kind of where we're in. And most people, I don't say most people, but I'd say most people in the world aren't even there, right? Don't even get to sit around and wonder what their lives are going to look like 10 years from now. They're like, I'm worried about how I'm going to get food 3 days from now, kind of a thing. Yeah, I think there's a healthy sense of really creating security and safety around yourself, but also using every bit of your energy to do what you're suggesting, and that's finding solutions to the problems and working through everything with additional help, pointing out your blind spots as you're moving toward it. I wonder if you can solve problems the same way if you don't have that sense of insight about yourself changing, all those things. Man, what are you currently what are you currently
That's where I was going with this too.
Wrestling with right now?
Let's turn the lens on, right?
Yeah,
Let's go inside. So but I'm hesitating only because it's like not trying to come up with one. It's like, which one do I choose?
Sure.
To be honest, because there's a few right now that I'm pushing against.
Okay.
So I think the one that I'm going to talk about first, or only, depending on how this conversation goes, is this presumption that as your kids get to be teenagers, they become disassociated with their parents. Now there's a biological separation that will take place because they become independent. Biologically, they're being moved towards that independence. Mm-hmm. So therefore there is a natural separation between mom and dad and them creating their own belief systems. Mm-hmm. Yes. But as soon as they become teenagers, they become, I mean, you could list out, focused on their friends, not the family, consumed by social media, unwilling to interact with mom and dad, rebellious, right? I mean, you could
There's a lot of topics.
You could just line it up,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's this perception that as they become teenagers, you lose them, and then you don't get them back till they're in their 20s. That's kind of the consensus. Now, the caveat here is I haven't lived with my kids through teenage years, so I'm speaking on some level maybe out of ignorance.
Sure.
But this is an example for me where I'm going, is that just a story we tell ourselves? Or
I say yes.
Is that going to be the reality? And I want to believe the former, that it's just a story.
Here's my opinion on this matter, and maybe this is my own cognitive dissonance.
And I'm sure there's people listening to us going, you don't have any idea, you naive, ignorant. And I'd be like, careful, that's a story.
I'd say 80-20. I think 80% of teenage relationships with good parents and families that are present in their kids' lives are healthy relationships. I think 20% are not, and the 20% are the loudest of the group.
Interesting.
That's what I think. So when you hear it like, oh, it's just going to get hard. You have no idea. Teenage girls, it's going to be horrible. I've talked to too many parents where they're like, dude, it's fine, man. Like, yeah, they're going to go through some stuff, but you know, like we invested in them when they were younger. My friend Will said it perfectly. He said, man, if you really get it right early, everything else works itself out later. If you don't get it right early, it does not work itself out later.
You can't all of a sudden decide that you're going to behave radically different and interact radically different with your teenager that you didn't set the precedence for when they were 8.
Exactly.
You can't do it.
Exactly.
Right? You can't all of a sudden create constraints and rules and things that they have to abide by when they're teenagers because the consequences are higher, and let them be latchkey, running loose, no rules. You're not in control of, you know, the things that they do and the things that they say when they're 8. Like, you can't do that.
What do you think is the most ideal way to approach Van going into this season?
Communication. I think the most ideal way. I think that what I'm trying to do right now is set up the expectation that we talk about it, whatever it is, that we're talking about his bad attitude today, that we're talking about the way he responded to his sister, the way he responded to his mom, that we're talking about his approach to athletics, that we're talking about his attitude. And I'm gonna keep coming back to attitude because as they kind of make this pivot, that's a lot of it is their attitude changes. Right. But the way that they're interacting and the way they're viewing the thing that they're interacting with is I'm trying to establish like, no, we're going to talk about this. Why'd you behave like that? Yeah. Why are you so angry about this project? Right. Well, it's just hard. We do hard things. So what? Why is this project setting you off? Right. And creating the normalcy that dad's involved. Right. That we talk about this, that we recognize good behavior and bad behavior, that we focus on effort, not outcomes, right? Trying to create a few pillars that we can lean on. Yeah. That create home bases as we go forward. That's what I'm hoping to do. That's as I kind of fumble around for how to put that into words, creating home bases now that I can come back to and lean on as this is what Stokeses do as we move forward. Right. Right? We do hard things first. We problem solve. We're in control of our attitude. Right? We're kind to others. Creating some pillars of like, these are the things. There'll be fluctuations. And you're going to deviate for this. You're going to have a crappy attitude. I have a crappy attitude about things.
And recognizing that and sharing that with your children is so powerful. It really is. Like, hey, man, I get there too, right? Lets them go, oh, this is relatable. I'm not the only one. I'm not crazy. I'm not bad. I'm not whatever.
Which throws back to our failure conversation, right? Because, I'm dealing with Van feeling like he's failing, which he's not at all. But he feels that way. But to relate, like, dude, let me tell you about the failure I had this week. Right. Like, this is part of it. Right? Same thing with attitudes. Same things with deviations from these home bases. But that's what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to establish core beliefs that are true that will serve him later
Right.
That's what I'm trying to do.
I don't do this well, but I want to do it better. I want to speak to my children as if they're not my own. Meaning, when it comes to hard topics, like if I approach my children the same way I would talk to Van about these things, it would probably sound a lot different. The tone of it would be different. There'd probably be a little bit more uncle care to it, right? Hey, I got your back, buddy.
Oh, interesting.
And I wonder if I just took it from that approach of talk to your children the same way you would talk to your friends' children.
Wow.
Right? Approach it that way. How creative would you get with it? Would you counsel them better? Would you say things differently, like simply changing whys to whats? Instead of why do you do this? What is it about this that, right? Little incremental changes that might totally reshape conversations in a really healthy way.
Wow, that's a great backstop.
I'm not good at it. I want to be good at it. I do. Yeah.
Interesting.
Because my emotions cook with my kids. They do. I wish they didn't, but they cook. And I
think that's common for parents.
Yeah. But I don't want it to come across as accusatory or short or frustrated, just because I can't keep my own emotions at bay, But if I do just sit down and go, how would I talk to Micah about this topic? How would I talk to Nora? How would I talk to wildly different? I know for a fact it would be. Probably be more like a teacher or a counselor than it would be I'm just don't want to deal with this parent, And I'm hard on myself, but it feels that way sometimes.
Well, we just become, we see the repetition of it, right? And so we end up being annoyed by it versus if it's somebody else's kid, you don't see that they did this for the 77th time today. And it's just this moment. Right. It's very similar. I don't know if you guys might not have this dynamic, meaning your family, but because I'm in the office all day and Holly's with the kids all day, relatively, they're in school, but you know what I mean? I'll come downstairs. I work from home. I'll come downstairs from the office and Holly will be stressed out because she's had to deal with the kids all day. And I get to come in kind of like, hey, everything's great. Like, why are you overreacting to this? This isn't that big of a deal. And it's like, she's like, we've talked about this 9 times today. It is a big deal.
And now she's mad at you for saying it.
Right?
Yeah.
It's kind of on that level. Like there needs to be grace in that for yourself too.
Sure.
Like it's a good backstop and a good lens to be like, how could I pivot this conversation? But it's also not a realistic expectation that you're going to be able to do that every time. Right? That's just not how this thing works.
There's the dad coach. You've probably seen him. He does a good job putting stuff out there.
I don't know, maybe.
But he basically said, don't be a nagging parent, right?
Yeah.
Don't be the parent's like, remember to do this, stop doing that, put on your jeans, whatever, right? Especially before school. I can really turn into a nagging dad really, really fast. Yeah. But he said, you have to take it from an approach of, he said the only way to fix that potentially is to ask for your kids' help. Say, I don't want to be a nag anymore. It drains me. It wears me out. I don't want to be. But there has to be a partnership here, right?
Wow.
The only way for this to work is you help me make sure that these things are done so I don't feel like I have to go there, right? And if we can all partner up and team up to make that happen, I'd really appreciate it. And I'm like, I didn't see it happen in real life. He's saying this on camera, but man, I thought, yeah, I can take a different approach to things.
Yeah.
I can think about this differently. I don't have to be swallowed up by all of this dissonance in my life, convincing myself of these stories I'm telling myself. No, things can be different. I'm changing. The world's changing. We can change with it. I think it's normal.
Yeah. So that's one story that I'm trying to push against of like probably a handful of things that I could have chosen. And, maybe there'll be an opportunity here before we're done to talk about some of the others. But what about for you? You mentioned one of them, like, I just wing it. That's what I do. Like what else is maybe,
the deeper we've talked about it a little bit previously, but I'll be very vulnerable here because I think we all have these things about our personalities, but just a constant need for wanting to impress people, right? It's this idea, and I build that into dissonance because I believe
like comparison.
It's a part of my identity, not as much as I'm doing this thing, but don't worry about that thing. I'm working on this thing.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Like I'm moving toward this, like sharing that I'm opening the next office. I've been doing that a lot, right? Because I want you to know that I'm growing and I'm doing this next thing. And I say that and I bring that up because it just doesn't feel becoming. It doesn't feel like Sure, it might have people go, oh, interesting. Okay. And in some ways, it is important. Like when I'm out on Broker's Tour, I've been committing to Broker's Tour every Wednesday. I do want to mention those things so that those Wenatchee agents I'm trying to recruit are going, wait, what?
Yeah.
In fact, I had one lady pull me aside afterward and say, when you open that second office, let me know. I'm ready. What? Okay. All right. This is important to do. But in certain circumstances or settings, it isn't important. And I think I just want to be okay being okay. Yeah. I don't want to always have to project something or make it feel like, not that I'm better than people. That's not it at all. But that I'm always achieving something. I'm always like, you perceive me as an achiever, and I maintain that stance and that identity. And again, I don't think all of that's negative. I think there's some positive in that as well, but not when it starts to consume you, not when it starts to take over and feel like it's too automatic. I kind of want to change that. I just want to be okay being okay.
Okay being okay. Yeah. We always want to be something we're not.
Yeah. Or at least just give you the perception of that. And I know that sounds crappy, it's like, oh, really, dude? But I look at your social media accounts. I mean, you kind of prove it to yourself too.
It's highlight reel, bro.
Yeah. And I think we want to stay in that highlight, or I do. I'll speak for myself. I think I want to stay in that highlight reel.
You can say we.
Yeah. I think we all do. I think we would just want to put that out there but I think you also see here too, that I also want to be a genuine individual and make sure that I'm always having a authentic and vulnerable stance in front of people so that I always maintain a human output. I never want people to think I'm better than I'm not. And so I struggle with that though. I feel that way and I want that, but then I project something else. So for me, that's the disconnect.
How do we, and I'm not sure this is a we thing. When I say we, I did mean you and I in this conversation, but I don't know that's necessarily something that we can solve, but can we talk to it at least? How do we help people see these blind spots, these stories that you and I, through experience, can identify, but others aren't? They're either unwilling or haven't been introspective or aware enough to see them. What can they do themselves? Maybe that's a better way to put it. What can they do themselves as they hear this and they go, okay, I can see how that's true. I don't know that, like, yeah, but, right? I can hear the yeah, buts just thrown.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you don't understand my situation. Yeah, but you haven't lived that yet. Yeah, but this hasn't happened to you yet. So you don't know that. You don't know this. Yeah, but I can hear them. What is there anything that we can do to speak to the yeah buts of the person that's listening right now?
I believe most of us just fear judgment, right? We don't want to be judged for misgivings or mistakes we've made. And so I think the only true way, my best advice to anybody is you have to sit down with somebody that is a neutral human being that can give you a safe space to be in, be able to share all of your life and thoughts and feelings with them and get that feedback back. If you have a friend or somebody in your life and you don't necessarily want to pay a coach or someone to do that, I get that, right? Sometimes it's a financial barrier. I get it. Find someone who you deeply cherish and adore and know that won't judge you and project on you. And you need to ask, what are my blind spots? I need to know. I need to know. Now, coming to terms with those blind spots, for me personally, that's the hardest part. It's not hearing it, it's processing it of really, I had to come to terms with the fact that I'm all grace in my leadership. That doesn't work. You have to have grace and truth. Having Stephanie in my life now that can speak a lot of truth for me, life-giving. I have to have that balance. I had to have someone tell me, Gavin, this is your blind spot. In fact, I had an old coach tell me that. I was like, no, everything's going to work out. All these agents are going to be amazing. They're going to make tons of money. We're going to crush it. He goes, that's a blind spot. He goes, I love it, and I love that you're positive about it, but not all these agents are going to do that well. In fact, half of them are going to do this. A third of them are going to do this, blah, blah, blah. And he breaks it down, and that's exactly what happened, actually. The results at the end of the year were exactly what he said they were going to be. And so, anyway.
Yeah, I think I think it also, I think fundamentally, it has to start at a place of, I want this to be different. If you can't get there, it's almost kind of the Sedona method.
Do you want to go over that real quick?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it last time or the time before, and I'll mention it again. So it has to do with emotion and internal feelings. What am I experiencing? What am I feeling is step one of it. It's a 3-step process. So what am I experiencing? Let's put language to it. What am I feeling? Okay. The second question is, are you ready to be done with it?
Ready to let it go.
Are you ready to let it go? Are you ready to not feel that way anymore? And the third piece of that is, if so, when are you going to do that? And the implication that it's your choice. It's your decision to not feel this way. I think we first have to be, as we think about these stories, whether that's professionally, I can't quit this job, or this is just the way teenagers are, or I don't have time to get in the gym. We have to start by going, I don't want it to be that way. I don't want my professional life to feel like this. And I'm ready for it to not.
Right.
I'm ready for the unknown. I'm ready for that uncertainty of whatever the pivot is, as scary as that feels, as big as that feels. So if I'm ready, when am I going to make that change?
Yeah.
Right? But it has to come from a place of recognizing, being aware that you're unhappy where you're at.
And you have the power of choice.
Yeah.
And you have to be in that position too. Some people I get, I'm not projecting and saying everybody is in self-actualization and gets choice.
Yeah.
But if you are there, it's choice. You have choice.
Yeah. And if you're there, then we can turn it into a process.
Right. In fact, I remember a video you sent me. It was awesome. The guy said, thoughts are like waves, right? Waves in the ocean. You can't control what comes in, but you can definitely pick the ones you ride and get up on your surfboard and take time on and take time with.
Yep.
And then the girl said, I wish you were my dad. And the guy was like, your dad's right there. Hi, Dad. It's pretty dang good. But but it's true. You have control and choice over those things.
Yep.
Whether you believe it or not, you do. And then one thing I want to say too, I think I'm a big permission guy. You know that, right?
Yep.
Like I'm just waiting for permission somehow. And sometimes I need that validation. But let me give some people validation today. I understand why you would not want to quit your job, right? That's security, that's financials, that's a big decision to make. But I think more times than not, it's not so much the circumstances of the job itself, meaning the financials and things like that. I think it's hurting people's feelings. I think most people don't want to let their boss down. They don't want to let their coworkers down. They don't want to ruin this environment that they maybe even work so hard to build potentially. And they're afraid to walk away from that and harm.
I know, I've said that.
And harm these individuals. Let me just absolutely remind you and guarantee you will not harm them. It may hurt them. It might hurt them in the short term. They'll have to figure out somebody else to bring on and train up and get in that position, but soon they will. Their feelings will go with it and they'll move with it. You will not harm them. You will not, by saying no to somebody, which means quitting that job, you will not harm them. You may hurt them, but you will not harm them. And that for me is a really important distinction in boundaries, right? In knowing that they're going to be okay. You know, if I make this decision, it's going to be way better for me, 80% better for me. And they're going to be all right. They're going to make it. They're going to find a solution. And if you could be a part of that solution, even better, right? Helping them find a new person or training them in that position. But you can be proactive about those things in making those bigger decisions. It's not always, oh, it's just too hard. Yeah, it is hard. But that, a hard situation requires methodical steps to get through the problem. And you're going to have to create those steps. It's just part of it.
As you were talking about that, I was flashing on, and I'll stick in the career vein, the stories that we tell ourselves. I can't quit my job. This is all I know how to do. What else in the world would I go do? Right? These things that hold us back. And for some reason, and I don't know why, because it's so obvious once you say it, why do we feel that it's an all or nothing game? Why do we feel that you must quit this job first? Why don't we spend the next 6 months interviewing, talking to other people, looking for that next thing to go be a part of, finding the next perfect fit, so that you're not just quitting your job and putting your family in jeopardy, you're pivoting. Why do we go, what else would I do? I don't know how to do anything else. Why don't we take the next 6 months and learn a new skill?
How many times? I'm going to give
so
you
that you can go do something else.
I'm going to give you another example real quick. How often do I convince myself that I need to check out at night? I need to turn on the TV and totally check out. If I would take that time to educate myself in new ways. We talk about not having enough time. That's BS. If you have kids, trust me, your life is full. That's part of it. But you have time. You have time, right? If you look at your work week throughout the week, right? If you look at 40 hours a week, 8 hours a day, you're up for 16 hours a day. So you have an additional 8 hours a day that you're doing what? I mean, yeah, you're doing some family stuff, some dinner, some eating, things that just are a part of the day. But my guess is you have an additional 3 to 4 hours a day that you probably fill with a bunch of nonsense.
Yep.
I do.
Yep.
You do. We do. We all do. But if you're right. Instead of quitting and starting over, why not just add on a few things at the end of the night? Or one thing even. One thing. If you read for 30 minutes a night on one topic, you would be more well-versed in that topic within 100 hours of reading on that topic than 95% of the world.
Look, this isn't an all or nothing. It has to be this way forever.
Great point, man. Great point.
But cancel the Netflix, cancel the Disney Plus, cancel the Apple Plus, whatever your vice is in the evening, turn it off. Cancel it for a season.
Right.
And make the pivot. Like, invest in yourself. Like, you're not stuck.
Nope.
You're not stuck. My marriage is unrecoverable. Well, have you started counseling? Right? We don't take the next step, and we feel like it's this huge, daunting transition.
Yeah.
And it's the reason we don't take action. You're the story guy, but I'm actually going to lay a story on you. So it reminds me of, I don't know if it was a parable, doesn't matter. But there's two neighbors and an old man sitting on the front porch of one of the houses and another man sitting on the porch of the other house. And on the one porch is an old basset hound, and he is howling.
That's pretty good.
Right? That's about what it sounds like.
Yeah.
You got bloodhounds, you know.
That's pretty good.
Okay. And the neighbor calls over to the guy with the dog and goes, "What in the world is wrong with your dog? Why is he howling?" And the neighbor goes, "Well, he's sitting on a nail." What? Why doesn't he get off the nail? Must not hurt bad enough.
Wow.
And there's some truth in that. Like, we complain, but we're not willing to take action because it's not painful enough. Well, if it's not painful enough for you to change, then stop complaining.
Yeah.
Because you do have the choice.
I'll give you another great example and story. So a man named Link Jackson just sold his company called Stream Tech Boats. I met him down in Patagonia. He used to actually build huge commercial warehouses. He was a multimillionaire, owned a humongous commercial real estate company with a partner of his. He was wildly unhappy doing it. It just absolutely stressed him all to all get out. He was a big adventure outdoor guy. He wanted to be in the woods and the mountains more and more, so he created this company. He just sold it, moved on, is retired. I'm really happy for him. But anyways, long story short, had he not had that conviction and stopped his multi-million-dollar project, and he said, you know, I have my Edward Jones account's a lot smaller these days, but my happiness is a lot bigger, and that's more important to me. And anyways, my point is I sent him a text with a photo of me and Wells out on the raft, floating down the Yakima River. And I just sent him a text and I said, because one day you decide, well, hopefully I don't get emotional saying this, but I said, one day because you decided you wanted to build rafts for a living, gave me this one day to remember for the rest of my life. I said, we don't understand the ripple effects our legacy is going to have on the world, but thank you for following your passion, because your ripple effect is going to guarantee many awesome memories from my friends and family already has.
Yeah.
And I wanted him to know and feel that. And I just want to say that to you guys too, is what's your legacy? What do you want your legacy to be? Whether or not you can see the fruit and feel the fruit of what you've built and created, it doesn't matter. The legacy you put out into the world will forever be felt, and there will be a ripple effect that will go on forever. So the decisions you make daily, maybe the change you decide on, the pivot you make, can completely change the world for the better. What is your legacy going to be?
Yeah.
What do you want it to be? I know that's a big question. That's an existential question. But ask it and sit with it and process it and make decisions every day that follow that. Because if you do that, it will always be good work. You'll never have to question that. And if you don't have to question that, then you can get up every day and feel good about what you're doing. And if that happens, holy smokes, man. Unstoppable.
I'm going to quote two people as we wrap this up. One's Gary Vee. Life's too short to do shit you hate.
Amen.
And another coach of mine from back in the day, Brad Duncan, and he said, stop lying to yourself. You must stop lying to yourself. And we do it constantly. I love my job. Do you? Do you really? Do you love it more than floating down the river with your son on a Monday?
Nope.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
what kind of life do you want to live?
Yep.
And here's the truth. If you're listening to this podcast, like on some level, you're already there.
Right.
I think it's now just going, how much more intentional can I be about this? Can I get the coaches? Can I get the backstop? Can I have somebody help me see the things I'm not seeing? Like, you're not listening to this and like calling us out on like all the yeah buts. I mentioned the yeah buts. If you're listening to this, you're not a yeah but guy. But
Or gal.
Yeah.
But yeah, we know what we know. We know what we don't, and we know the difference. And I think that's a good place to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love you, man.
Love you too.
Appreciate you.
We out.
We're out. Thank you for tuning in to Processing Purpose. We hope you grabbed a few gold nuggets to take one step forward in your journey of life and business. Please remember to like and subscribe our channel if you'd like to get more content to help you build and grow everything around you. Make today your best day. Today is day one.